Before watching the video, can you please save a little bit time to like and subscribe to SkypluS Top Mover to increase?
On February 25, 2009, Turkish Airlines Flight 1951, also known as the Polder crash, departed Istanbul Ataturk International Airport for a flight to Amsterdam Schiphol International Airport, the Netherlands. The aircraft operating Flight 1951 was a 7-year-old next-generation Boeing 737-800 series Model 8F2 with registration TCJG, named Tekkerdağ. It had 51 aircraft of this model in service at the time of the crash. The aircraft made its first flight on January 24, 2002, and was delivered to Turkish Airlines on March 27, 2002. On board were 128 passengers and 7 crew members. The flight crew consisted of 3 pilots: Captain Hasan Tahsin Arizin, age 54. A former Turkish Air Force fleet commander, Captain Arizin had been working for Turkish Airlines since 1996 and was one of the most experienced pilots at the airline. He had over 5,000 hours of flight time on the F-4E Phantom II. The first officer Murat Sezer, 42-year-old, underlined training in the right seat, and an additional first officer Olga Yazgar, 28-year-old, who occupied the flight deck jump seat. The first officer underlined training was the pilot flying.
Rotate. Gear up. Flaps.
The flight was cleared for an approach on runway 18R, also known as the Polderbahn runway, but came down short of the runway threshold, sliding through the wet clay of a plowed field. The aircraft suffered significant damage. Although the fuselage broke into 3 pieces, it did not catch fire. Both engines separated and came to rest 100 meters, 330 feet, from the fuselage. About 60 ambulances arrived along with at least 3 Lifeliner helicopters and a fleet of fire engines. Has deaths of 9 passengers and crew, including all 3 pilots. The bodies of the 3 cockpit crew members were the last to be removed from the plane, around 2000 hours that evening, because the cockpit had to be examined before it could be cut open to get to these crew members. The investigation was led by the Dutch Safety Board and assisted by an expert team from Turkish Airlines and a representative team of the American National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, accompanied by advisors from Boeing and the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. While on final approach for landing, the aircraft was about 2,000 feet, 610 meters, above ground. Captain's radio altimeter suddenly changed from 1,950 feet, 590 meters, to read -8 feet, -2.4 meters, altitude, although the right first officer altimeter functioned correctly. The voice recording showed that the crew was given an audible warning signal, landing gear warning horn, that indicated that the aircraft's landing gear should be down, as the aircraft was, according to the captain's radio altimeter, flying too low. This happened several times during the approach to Schiphol. The reason that the captain's radio altimeter was causing problems was the first officer making a mistake when arming the aircraft's autopilot system for a dual-channel ILS approach. The Boeing 737 NG-type aircraft has 2 autopilot systems or flight control units, FCU, which can work independently of each other, single-channel, or together, dual-channel. These systems are called CMDA and CMDB. CMDA is seat FCU of captain, while CMDB is the right seat FCU of first officer. During normal operations, the PF, pilot flying, uses their respective FCU. This is referred to as a single channel. However, if the crew intended to fly an auto-land, which is when the airplane flies the approach and landing itself, during a Cat 3 ILS approach, one would engage both FCUs. This way the approach can be flown to greater precision and bad visibility. This is called a dual channel. Turkish Airlines standard operating procedure at the time stated that all approaches should be flown dual channel when available, But the inexperienced, on the 737NG first officer forgot to arm approach mode in the aircraft's mode control panel (MCP) before he engaged CMDA to make the approach dual channel, meaning that the aircraft thought the pilots wanted to do a single channel approach using CMDA captain's autopilot only. However, unbeknownst to the pilot, CMDA had a radio altimeter fail, which would be the main contributor to the accident. The throttles were pulled back to idle thrust to slow the aircraft to descend and acquire the glide slope, but the autothrottle unexpectedly reverted to retard mode, which is designed to automatically decrease thrust shortly before touching down on the runway at 27 feet, 8.2 meters, above runway altitude. At 144 knots, 267 kilometers per hour, the pilots manually increased thrust to sustain that speed, but the autothrottle immediately returned the thrust lever to idle power because the first officer did not hold the throttle lever in position. It was reported that the first officer survived the crash itself, but that rescuers were unable to reach him via the cockpit door, owing to security measures introduced in the wake of the September 11, 2001 attacks. The rescuers eventually cut their way into the cockpit through the roof, by which time the first officer had died. The final report was released on May 6, 2010. The DSB stated that the approach was not stabilized, hence, the crew ought to have initiated a go-around. The autopilot followed the glide slope, while the autothrottle reduced thrust to idle, owing to a faulty radio altimeter showing an incorrect altitude. This caused the airspeed to drop and the pitch attitude to increase. All this went unnoticed by the crew until the stick shaker activated.
Thank you for watching the video. If you have an idea of flight, please comment below to everyone discuss.